Hey, so the three movements in this video will be something called the front step through, which will then develop into the jumping kick through, which is a move from animal flow. We're going to break that down into three progressions, and I'll explain as we go along. The second move is the archer push-up. It's quite an advanced push-up, and so I'll show you the modification of that as well if you haven't quite got the full archer push-up yet. And then we will end with the Cossack squat. Okay, so the first movement we're going to do is the front step through, which will then progress to the jumping kick through. I think those are the correct names. They're from animal flow, which is influenced by lots of different things, one of which is martial arts, and you'll see components of martial arts in this movement. It's really good for lots of different muscle groups in your body actually. Your shoulders, serratus anterior, the compression strength that you generate in your abs and your hip flexors, and then pretty much every single muscle in your leg and the end point of this move. You have to keep everything engaged and in tension, which encourages strength and mobility all through the leg, and also develops your coordination as well. We're going to break this down into three progressions or three phases. The first is the front step. The start position of this move is something called the loaded beast, which is like child's pose in yoga with wide legs. If you've got a mat, bring your knees out to the edges of the mat, and whereas this would be child's pose in yoga with your buttocks down, resting on your heels, what you want to do for loaded beast is untuck your toes and then lift your knees about an inch off the floor. And then from this loaded beast position, we're going to bring our left foot forward, replace our left hand, bring it in line with the right hand, and bring your left hand in line with your face. What I'm thinking about in this position is keeping my right leg, my back leg, as straight as possible by pushing my heel back down towards the floor. Meanwhile, I'm thinking about pushing the floor away with my right hand, externally rotating my arm to engage the lat and the serratus anterior on this side. And if you want to just pause here for a second and move around a little bit, start to feel what it feels like in this position. Maybe rotate just a little bit in your upper body to feel maybe a little bit more of a stretch in the hips. Open up the hip flexors on the right hand side and bring the left leg back, return to loaded beast, and then right foot forward, replacing right hand, keeping my left leg as straight as possible and thinking about pushing the floor away with my left hand. And again, just pause here for a second or two, move around, drop that hip a little bit to feel what that feels like, and then return to loaded beast. And we'll just do a couple more on each side to get used to this movement. Return to loaded beast, knees down and rest. So, step number two, this is the front kick through. Start again in loaded beast, knees an inch off the floor, left foot replaces left hand, and really think about pushing the floor away again with the right hand to allow space to bring the right leg through. Don't let it drop onto the floor. And I want to point it straight out in front of me, externally rotate the leg, point the toes, and bring your left hand out in front of you as a guard. And then bring it back through and return to loaded beast. And exactly the same on the other side. Push the floor away with this side to allow space to bring your left leg through, externally rotate the leg, right arm up in guard position, and then back through. We'll just do a couple more on each side. And back down onto your knees and catch your breath. So if you feel relatively comfortable with that movement and you want to progress it to the jumping kick through, you can, and Although this might actually look a little bit more advanced or a little bit more difficult, I actually find that it's easier because you're generating momentum and using that momentum to carry you through and back again. Whereas what we just did, you're doing it that slowly, it requires quite a lot of control and muscle engagement all the way through the movement. It's a really good hybrid between an isometric hold and slow muscular contraction. But like I said, this one, you're using momentum to generate speed. Just a couple of things to watch out for when you're doing this movement. Hand and foot placement. First of all, start off with your hands roughly shoulder width apart, or perhaps just a touch wider. Essentially in line with the knees. When you come through, when you step with that front leg, like I said, you want to keep the foot in line with the hand here. And you want this hand to maintain its alignment with the shoulder. If it's too wide, it's going to throw you off balance. When you try and kick through, it's going to be difficult. And if it's too close to this foot, you make it really hard for yourself to step through. So the movement is exactly the same as what we just did, but sped up and jumping through the movement from front to back and so on. I find it a lot more fun and it gets the heart racing. It's a really good aerobic exercise, so good for your cardiorespiratory system. So we'll start with a right side jump through, which means we're going to be planting our left foot down and kicking through with our right foot. And rest. And as a bonus, you can progress this one step further by jumping through from right to left without returning to loaded beast, which looks something like this. So the archer push-up is a relatively advanced move because it requires equal strength between right and left sides of your upper body, and it really highlights any imbalances or deficiencies you have between right and left, which is why it's such a great movement to, as with pretty much all push-up variations, this one works the chest and shoulders, but whereas most push-ups work the triceps in the arms, the archer push-ups also work the biceps, which is unusual for push-ups. You should feel, as you're going through the movement, you should feel a really nice contraction and lengthening, a nice stretch of the biceps as you work through it. I'll show you the full move first and then modifications from there. So start on your hands and knees, then place your hands quite far apart, wider than shoulder width apart, although the exact placement will depend on the length of your arms and the proportions essentially of your body. For me, I think this is probably about the position I'll put them in, but I might need to adjust as I go through. And actually that's a pretty good tip. If it feels really hard in the position you're in, just play with widening your stance a little bit. And actually, although that might be counterintuitive, sometimes the wider you are, the easier it becomes, or you'll find your sweet spot. Hands quite wide apart, fingers facing away from each other, and then with your pelvis tilted posteriorly and your glutes and your abs engaged, get up into this high plank position and then lower down from one side, back up to the other. And that is the archer push-up. So if that is just way too hard for you, there's a couple of things you can try. The first is play with the position of your hands. Perhaps don't go so wide, perhaps go wider, and just find what works for you. The second is, once you've found that position with your hands, you don't need to go all the way down. If that's as far as you can go, just go to there, and then there, and just play with the depth that you go to. And then over time, you'll build up the strength and you'll be able to go down lower. The next modification you can make, if even that is too difficult for you at first, is just do this on your knees. So bring your hands out to the position that works for you. Keep your core and your buttocks engaged to protect your back. And on your knees, just come down to wherever you feel the stretch in your biceps and chest. And then move back up to the other side. And just like the military push-ups that we did last time, even that on your knees works the muscles in a really good way. And if all of that was too easy for you, then play with staying down in that lowest position as you move from side to side, which looks something, hopefully, like this. That is the archer push-up. And so finally for today, we've got Cossack squats, which in a way are actually similar to what we've just done with the archer push-ups, in that they isolate the muscles on each side of the body, this time the lower body, and sharp any imbalances in strength and mobility from side to side. These are really good for the muscles in the legs, primarily the glutes, hamstrings and quads, and they especially target the adductors, the inner thigh and the groins. They're fantastic for developing mobility, for increasing range of motion in those muscles, which for a lot of people, me especially, I've got very tight adductors, and these are great for really getting in there and loosening it up and working through any sort of very tight kind of grizzle, essentially. So let's get to it. Switching to voiceover mode temporarily because I had a bit of a sound issue here. Start off with quite a wide stance, your feet wider than hip width apart and your feet pointing outwards at around a 45-degree angle. You might have to play around with the width of your feet, a little bit like we just did with the archer push-ups, until you find the right spot for the proportions of your body. And then what we're going to do, while keeping your core nice and tight and your chest elevated as much as possible in order to keep your back in a neutral position, just going to simply squat down towards one side and go as low as you can, back up and then to the other. And what I'm doing here is I'm lifting and rotating the foot and the leg that's remaining straight, which will work the inner thighs even more. I'm using my arms as a counterbalance, so I'm sticking them out in front of me as I squat down. If you can't go that low to begin with, just go down as low as you can, and then over time, as you start to develop the strength and the mobility in the hip, you'll be able to go a little bit lower each time. So there we had it, the front step through and jumping step through or kick through, the archer push-ups and Cossack squats. It's really up to you how you program this in terms of number of reps and sets. What I tend to do is create a circuit out of these kind of exercises, perhaps 3 to 6 of these exercises, work out the number of reps I'm going to do for each exercise and go through each set sequentially, perhaps 3 to 5 times, and that is a pretty good daily workout. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.